Round one. Fight!
Welcome to Riffin with a couple of 90 guys. My name is Tony, and my co-host here is Mr. Peter Williams, the ever so fascinating man from the 90s. How you doing, Peter?
Yes. How's it going, my 90s brother? How you doing?
It's going a little not so good. I've been fighting the flu for about a week now.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a whole outbreak going around San Diego, so
Yeah, I hear it's a bunch of Z's to A's. People seem to be
yeah.
getting infected with some sort
People
of
turning
virus.
into zombies and aliens. I don't know
Yes,
what's going on.
it's strange. I don't understand. Well, how's your week been?
Good. I'm surprised I haven't got the measles when we took the family to Disneyland on Valentine's Day, so I'm surprised I don't have the measles, so that's good.
That is good. Yeah, I've been working kind of hard. It's been a long, busy week. So actually, I was yesterday when I was finally relaxing for a while because I have the weekends off, thankfully. I
Yeah.
found myself thinking there because I went on Twitter and I saw Tony Hawk had posted that there's gonna be a new Tony Hawk game,
Oh,
and
man.
that got me thinking. When's the
That's
last time I played like an excellent Tony Hawk game? And
uh
I gotta think, for me at least, I don't know about you, but Tony Hawk 2 and 3 were the bee's knees.
Yes. Oh my God. Talk about a quintessential 90s video game experience. Two and three, I played two a lot, not so much three, but I think the main one that takes the cake for me has to be the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, it would be 1, 2, and 3 would be the best, and I would rank them in my opinion. 2 would be top, and then 3, and then 1. But that's just
Could
my
you
end. Go ahead.
could you imagine a world without skateboarding video games? Like before in the 80s, there wasn't really anything to that level. I think there was maybe some little 8-bit things, but nothing like freaking Tony Hawk where you're pulling off tricks and stuff like that.
So you know what? You bring up a really good point. Um, if video games did not involve skateboarding like they did in the
Right.
90s, I think a lot of the special effects and the graphics and a lot of the gameplay, quite frankly, itself would not be as smooth as it is today if it weren't for the building
Exactly.
up of that.
Ex-
It's crazy
exactly.
how like the world of sports games actually in particular really push the boundaries of other games like the racing games even because of the graphics and the high end controls. You need the precision of the maneuvering of the controls.
And it's a complete 90s invention. Pretty much when the push came to 3D from 16-bit and 32-bit straight on to full-on 3D, that's when like sports games, driving games really took off. And
Yes.
I have to talk about one thing real fast that started in the 90s and it's give way to a whole brand new game genre and that everyone plays today, and that is first person shooter. And the game that started it all was, of course, GoldenEye 007
Yes.
on the Nintendo 64. It
Absolutely.
started everything.
So talk a little bit about that experience that you first had when you were first played that game.
Yeah, truthfully, I think this was the one game that I broke my multiplayer cherry on pretty much. Because you had four controllers, you plugged them in, you got four-player split screen, and then you're shooting each other in the freaking split screen, and it was just like what started everything. Everything I compare now, I compare it to freaking GoldenEye.
Yes, it definitely is the cream of the crop for what has become now a multitude of free multiplayer shooting games.
Yeah, and then the N64 controller, it has an analog, and then it also had a D-pad, and it sort of kind of was the inspiration for the two analog controllers that we have now.
I remember actually the first time I used a controller that had analog and the D-pad, and I was so confused because I was like, "What
Yes,
the hell are these little plastic things for?" But I
it
remember
is
once I got a hang of it, though, it's like, how could you ever go back to just the
right.
D-pad?
Right. It is hard to figure out, especially with the N64 controller since it's so massive and looks so weird. It is really hard to get used to. To like, okay, I got to move with this controller, but I look with the analog, and then yeah, it was really hard to get used to the GoldenEye controls. But once you did, then you're the
Yes.
master of it. It was just all good fun. And then they started coming out with the double analog controllers, and that just made life so much easier.
Yeah. Actually, so you we bring up two video games that are classics from the 90s, and I actually have a couple other video games if I could just list them all, and then we can kind of talk about the ones we want to talk about.
Yes, go ahead.
All right, so I'm just gonna list them all. So in no particular order, here's my favorite games from the 90s: Super Mario World, Pokemon Red slash Blue, Age of Empires, Donkey Kong
Oh,
Country, Crash Bandicoot,
oh,
Spyro,
keep going.
Street Fighter, and Tony Hawk, which we already talked about.
Yeah.
Those are the games that
Oh
I
man,
hold in the most highest regard.
I
What do
think
you,
everyone
any,
does really.
did you,
Just
what was your favorite from that list?
oh man, you had a lot of Crash Bandicoot. I think Crash Bandicoot. Because I'm a big Nintendo guy.
Yes.
So
What's
mine was
Sony?
Super Mario 64. But
Hmm.
Crash Bandicoot and Super Mario 64, I think, run neck and neck, and they, I think, are the inspiration for almost like every 3D adventure game, really.
Yeah, Crash Bandicoot wasn't necessarily open world. It was a scroller, but
Yeah,
it still felt like the 3Ds immersed you in much more than your typical side scrolling game. It just felt more
exactly.
like it had more depth. And that's one thing I really appreciated from that game, trying to find all the crazy places where you could get those what were they, apricots,
Yeah.
the fruits.
And like same thing with Super Mario 64 is yeah, they did almost the same thing is instead of like being a complete open world, you jump into paintings, which the
Yeah,
paintings would be a new level, and it's similar to what Crash Bandicoot did.
yeah, jumping into those warp zones in Crash Bandicoot, I think
Yeah.
3.
Yeah, see, kids, like back in the day, we didn't have Grand Theft Auto 5 with your complete open world.
Yeah, what is
Back in
this in?
back in the 90s, you had to freaking made Mario jump into a painting to go to a different level, you know?
Yeah, and we flying around in a little aircraft, like in the most confined space, was the best.
Yes, exactly.
Um, but I kind of want to pick apart out of the games I listed.
Yeah.
I think there was one game in particular that kind of revolutionized an entire console, and that would be Pokemon Red and Blue.
Oh my God, yes.
You want to talk a little bit about that and its affair with the Game Boy?
You know what? Talk about a game I think that emphasized like getting together with someone else and like trading Pokemon or even battling with your Game Boy. I think this sort of started like now with handhelds, started like, hey, now handhelds can play together now.
Yes,
That I think that's a 90s invention, and that had to start with freaking Pokemon,
I
with your
remember.
trading
Yeah,
Pokemon and then you're fighting together through like I think it was like a cable that you connect your Game Boys with.
yeah. I don't remember if I was for the Game Boy Color or the original Game Boy, but there was a Game Boy. I don't know if you recall, Peter, but you would have to hook up kind of both Game Boys and put them kind of together, and there would be like a
Oh,
little infrared sensor at the
right,
top, and you would
right.
link them, and they would touch, and then you could transfer Pokemon. Do you remember that?
Exactly. I think that was Game Boy Color, I want to say. And then like with the normal Game Boy, you would use like the little link cable or whatever.
Yeah, the little link cable. Yeah, I remember that. Just
But yeah,
trading.
that was so cool. And like, think about it. Like, that was in a age before Bluetooth, and that maybe what possibly, I don't know. I want to say big enough to inspire Bluetooth technology.
Well, it was almost like a little mini NFC, like
Right.
transmission of data because you touched both and through like some sort of wireless signal the data passed through. So yeah, it was a huge ahead of its time. I think it was definitely a step in what direction we would be taking in the future.
Man, I didn't even remember that till you told me. Jeez. Man, Nintendo, keep up
Nintendo.
the good work.
Yeah, absolutely. So, actually, that's a pretty good segue into what I wanted to talk about next, which was, consoles like Nintendo that thankfully have been able to successfully make it to the current generation of consoles we have right now. But there are other consoles which, unfortunately, for whatever reason, they did not make it. And I would like to
Right.
call this, our fallen brethren, the
Oh,
consoles of
yes.
yesteryear.
Oh,
So,
man.
do you have any consoles that you remember from the 90s that for some reason just did not make it?
So if we're still going with Nintendo, I think, well, I would say the Game Boy Color, well, it's definitely not around today, but it's extinct, and I think it should have some praise to it because with the Game Boy Color, I think that started everything that we know of handhelds today. The Game Boy Color made what everything possible today. Like, one of my favorite games on the Game Boy Color was a little game called, it's another Pokemon game, by the way. It was called Pokemon Pinball. And why
Hmm.
this was particularly revolutionary was this cartridge that you put in. It was a really big cartridge. It looked weird, and the reason why it looked weird was because it was attached to a rumble pack. And when you were playing Pokemon Pinball, it would freaking rumble your freaking Game Boy Color.
What?
And that is still something that hasn't been done on handhelds. Like even the PlayStation Vita doesn't have like rumble capabilities. The only thing I can think of is the Wii U gamepad has a rumble in it, but that's because it's like a controller itself.
That is crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and
That's
that
pretty.
was my. I think that goes down as my favorite like pinball game ever because you're first of all the pinball itself was a Pokeball, of course, and the main idea for playing the pinball game was in the middle you had so you had to activate stuff by hitting switches with the pinball, and then when you activated stuff, a Pokemon would appear in the middle, and then you would have to capture the Pokemon with your Pokeball pinball, and it was the best pinball game I ever
Man,
played.
that sounds like I missed out, man. That sounds like pretty fun. I
Yeah,
wonder what they go for on eBay now.
I'm a big pinball guy.
Yeah, I love
I always
pinball.
try to go on the machines in arcades.
That's the best part. Something about all those lights and
But yeah,
just
that was I think yeah, talk about retro. In the day, kids, there was places called arcades,
see, that's
and they
something that's
had
also
pinball
crazy.
machines.
Like arcades were so much bigger in the 90s than they were today.
Yeah,
I don't know for whatever
yes, of
reason.
course.
I feel like I don't know, like maybe it's like the fact that everybody has like an iPad, and which is why maybe they don't feel the need to go out and stimulate their brain through, actually going outside.
Well,
But
not only that, right. Not only that, but like the technologies with home consoles and how home
yeah,
consoles are relatively affordable today. People don't really need to go out into arcades and play
yeah,
machines
that's true.
now.
It's just something about like being in with the lights and feeling like the classic, glass and the metal on the pinball machines, and just I don't know, it's nostalgic. It
Right.
feels it brings
And
back
talk
good
about
memories.
the birth of like multiplayer, like getting on like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or like one of my favorite was
Wow,
the
yes,
Simpsons beat 'em up game. You start to
yes,
play by yourself, and then all of a sudden, just strangers come up and start playing with you. Talk
yeah. There was
about like the
social
birth of
aspect to
multiplayer
it.
there.
Yeah, the social aspect to that was cool. I mean, now you can't really see if you're walking down the street. Everybody's like walking and looking in their phone, whereas people I feel like in the 90s were a little more socially acceptable, and they were able
Yes.
to like discuss and go up to a stranger and go like, hey, want to play the game? Like, whereas if you were to do that now, I think it'd be
Right.
kind of strange, or you'd look strange doing it. It's kind of strange how
Right.
like society
There's
is like
some sort
changed.
of right. There's some sort of social disconnect there just because of technology and everything, and
Yeah,
now everyone can hide their face behind a computer and stuff.
yeah,
Wow,
so,
we're getting deep into this
yeah.
this
You
podcast.
know, actually, one thing I wanted to mention is there's a console that gets honorable mention, and I think that's the Dreamcast. You know,
Oh
it
man,
of
nice.
all
Yes.
it this console,
Yeah,
poor thing, it was actually a pretty well built console, I think. It had pretty good
it
graphics for
was.
its time, and yet it didn't attract as many attention as the PS2 did. So, I mean, some of the games that it some of the titles were just amazing, like Crazy Taxi. That was such a fun game.
Yes.
Did you ever play that?
Yeah, like, did you have a Dreamcast?
I had one briefly for like, but then I think we like returned it for like a PS2.
Ah,
Yeah, actually.
well, at least you had one, because the Dreamcast was one system that I always wanted, but I never had, and I've only played it at friend's house
Yeah.
and the taxi, and I also played, I think, one of the games that inspired many of the RPG games now was a game called Shenmue, where it was pretty much an open world RPG game about this guy trying to find I think the his father's killer, and it's pretty much you're walking around and then you have to do some like karate stuff. It's pretty much an action RPG game, but then you
Hmm.
go off and you do like side missions just like Grand Theft Auto or something like that to earn like money. Like you're moving boxes, you're playing this game called Lucky Hit, which is pretty much just a gambling game that you set up. You go into the booth and you're like the operator of this game called Lucky Hit, and then you ask people if they want to play, and then if you win more money than if you lose, and it's pretty awesome. Just the random things you can do. And then you could also go into an arcade and play some old school Sega games. It was
Really?
just ingenious of what they had going on for that RPG. And
Yeah,
I
that's
remember Crazy Taxi being just
yes.
the best like racing game, really, because I'm not really into racing games that much. I like the unrealistic racing games because like Crazy Taxi and like
Just
um,
driving around the
Mario
sidewalk trying
Kart.
to get somebody to go somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And that is just yeah. Any other Dreamcast games?
um, I can't think right now for some reason of any other Dreamcast games, but I'm sure there's many.
I
Um,
know Sonic got his reboot on the Dreamcast. I think
yes.
Sonic gained more popularity with the Dreamcast because that's when he went to 3D, and that's when they
Mhm.
actually got a Sonic 3D game down. Because before they couldn't figure out how to make Sonic as fast as he was in a side scroller, and
Yes.
then they came out with the first Sonic Adventure, and they figured out how to make Sonic as fast as he was on a 3D world as opposed to a 2D world.
Hmm.
What I thought was like next gen about the Dreamcast was the controller and that had a
The
little
controller.
LED, the little LED screen.
Yes.
I thought that was
That
like
looks so
so cool,
futuristic.
right?
That little screen, that little thing that's like probably not even that expensive to build was like such a like I don't know, it's a differentiating factor in
Pretty much
Dreamcast.
like a small Game Boy almost.
Yeah, it was cool. But yeah, the
No,
PS2, like I said, it totally killed it. And one of the reasons why I think is because a lot of people still at that time had PS1 games, and the
right,
ability to be able to just simply port it over to their new console without worrying if it was going to be backwards compatible is, I think, a huge reason why the PS2 was as successful as it was. Which
right.
is kind of strange when they pushed towards the PS3. one thing I never, have come to terms with is why they didn't just allow the 60 gig version to
Backwards
continue production so they could be
exactly,
backwards compatible.
exactly. I don't know. All I know is Nintendo still continues to be backwards compatible with everything. Though you can't play any GameCube games on a Wii U. You can play Wii games on a Wii U.
That's
So they're
awesome.
still doing that. And then most systems nowadays, they I guess solve the backwards compatibility issue by putting up their games on some sort of
Like,
service online.
yeah, the store.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's such a cop out, I think, because of course you're gonna put that offer there so that you could rebuy the game you already own. It's kind of silly.
Right. But yeah, and then I have this PS2 game disc that I'll never get to play again because it doesn't work on my PlayStation 3. And then that's just, yeah, I don't know why they did that exactly. We definitely have the technology for it. I guess they just don't want to put the work into it.
Yeah, well, oh well, what can you do?
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, actually, I think I covered a lot of topics that I wanted to talk
We
about. Is there
did.
something that you wanted to mention?
Well, if you just, I wanted to pose this question to you. Do you have any, like, do you want to know about any consoles that you may not have known about, like an extinct console that you may not have played? Is there anything out there that you can think, or because I have a couple of them that you
Um, y- uh, hmm. The I can't. Well, I think there is, but I can't pinpoint any. What? Tell me some, and maybe I'll.
Okay, so when the Game Boy came out, that started the whole handheld genre, and more people were starting to get into the handheld genre by the time the Game Boy Color came out. And the one other handheld system that I owned was, of course, when you have Nintendo, you have to have its rival come out with something as well, and that was Sega, and they came out with the Sega Game Gear. Now,
What
the
the heck?
Sega Game Gear, it was freaking massive. It was much bigger than the Game Boy, as opposed to physical size. So you couldn't really fit it in your pocket like a Game Boy or a Game Boy Color. I mean, it was really ridiculous. But just the games they had, you can play Sonic on there, just like it was on the Genesis, and you can play Sonic. One of my favorite games, again, was was another pinball game called Sonic Spinball, where Sonic himself was the pinball, and he had to hit them into places and go into different levels and stuff. And then I had an X-Men game, and it was just cool to have Sega games on a handheld device for the first time.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. That sounds pretty interesting. I didn't even know there was a Sega handheld console.
Yeah, it was really big. Maybe I'm blowing it up too much in my mind, but I remember it being as big as like a Wii U gamepad today,
What the
and
heck?
you would put a like a cartridge in it to play Sega games, Sega Game Gear games. But
Hell.
yeah, that's one. One other one I have to talk about because I think it's a little lesser known console, and it sort of helped next gen consoles as they were today. Was a system called a 3DO, and pretty much it was almost like a PlayStation. I think it was even before PlayStation, and it was a massive machine, almost like Xbox original Xbox size, and it played discs. It was one of the first systems I owned to play discs, and at the time, the hardware in it was just as powerful as any of the computers around during the 90s. So
Whoa.
you're playing normal PC games like one of the PC games was like Space Hulk, and you'd play that on the 3DO. And yeah, it was just a lesser known console that sort of died out, but it was a really powerful machine. And I remember the sounds coming out of the 3DO were just like that's when I know that like games were getting better because like even the sounds of games and the soundtracks of games were getting awesome.
Yeah, we took a turn in the '90s, from the late '80s to the '90s, where we went from mostly 8-bit music soundtracks to
8-bit
actual
music, yes,
music.
exactly.
There was a
And
change. It
that
was a
is because of the disc, because you can fit more information on the
more
disc,
data.
and the 3DO was actually CD-ROMs, and then you can even put your normal CDs in the 3DO and play it, and even have a visualization on the screen too. I think that was the first console that I ever remember doing that.
Yeah, I definitely think that the sound really took off in the 90s for video games, where that was like a critical component of music. Not that it wasn't in the 80s, because it was, actually, but just the
Right.
different style that it was. It was more realism. It was actual music. So yeah,
Yes,
I think
exactly.
that's pretty
Then
good
I have
analysis. Go ahead.
yeah, I have two little promos I want to just announce real
Oh,
fast.
absolutely.
If
Go
you ever
ahead.
want to take a walk down memory lane, um, go ahead to a site called Viz.com. Pretty much, it's an emulation site where you can play any old retro game, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, any like 8-bit, 16-bit game. You can play right off of your web browser. You don't need to download anything. You can
What's
just
the
play
name of
them
that?
right there on Viz.com.
How do you
Viz,
spell that?
Vizzed.com.
Hmm. All right, that's a good website.
Vizzed. Yeah. And they have pretty much you're renting the games each time you play them. They have a
You're
little, you got X points each day just by logging onto the site, and then each game costs a certain amount of points to play it. And it's just kind of ingenious.
That sounds awesome. Good call. Wow, this is awesome. I'm checking out the website now. I should stop because I'm gonna get distracted. This website looks awesome. All right. And what else was the thing?
And one last promo I have is if you're ever in San Diego and want to look at old video game systems or even buy old video game systems, you have to go to Luna Video Games, and they have everything. They had all the systems we just talked about and all the games we just talked about. You
Yeah.
can go into one of those stores here in San Diego. There's two, one in College Rolando area and one. I believe it's closer to PB
Yes.
that you can go in and look at vintage gaming.
And we don't make any money off of them. We're just talking about them because we like
I
them.
just wanted to give a shout out.
They have good stuff.
Yeah,
Check them out.
exactly.
Support your local businesses.
All right, I
All
think that.
right. I think that will wrap it up.
All right, so we usually end each episode
Yes.
with the wheel of morality. Do you have any life morals to say there, Tony? You want to leave us with?
Yes, I do actually.
Wheel of morality, turn, turn, turn. Tell us the lesson that we should learn.
If your console can play DVDs, then it'll win the 90s war.
Very good. Very good. All right, I think that's going to be it from us.
All right, everybody, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Round one. Fight!